This chart compares the annual revenue of modern glass megatowers to a building designed almost a century ago. Pulling in over $500 million every single year, the Empire State Building easily beats out its contemporary competition. In the 1920s, developers were locked in a race to build into the sky. While ego certainly played a role, the core motivation was a ruthless financial equation. By stacking floor after floor of rentable office space on a single plot of land, a developer could multiply their potential yield indefinitely. New York businessmen John Raskob and Al Smith understood this math perfectly. When they announced their new project in 1929, their target was specific. They wanted to engineer a structure completely optimized for economic success. What they ultimately created is a highly resilient, highly optimized business machine, cleverly disguised as an architectural marvel. In early 20th century New York, commercial leases operated on a strict, synchronized schedule, May 1st or October 1st. If a newly constructed building missed one of those dates, its massive halls would sit empty for months, bleeding millions of dollars in unrealized rent. To build a structure capable of housing massive corporate tenants, Raskob and Smith took a $16 million gamble on a plot of land in Midtown. By clearing away the old Waldorf Astoria Hotel, they secured a massive footprint measuring 400 feet long by 200 feet wide. To hit that unforgiving May 1st, 1931 lease deadline, they had roughly 13 months to construct the tallest building on the planet from the ground up. To achieve that necessary speed, the design relied heavily on identical prefabricated steel columns and beams. Hundreds of deliveries arrived on site each day, allowing workers to take modular pieces of steel and immediately lock them together. Supporting a massive force of 3,000 workers required extreme on-site logistics. Internal railway carts shuttled raw materials across the floors, and pop-up cafes were installed throughout the rising frame, so crews didn't lose time traveling to the ground for meals. Under this system, the framework grew by 4 floors a week. This aggressive, hyper-efficient assembly line allowed them to beat their deadline and stay under budget. But building tall was only half the equation. To maximize the actual profit inside those walls, they had to navigate an invisible, legal barrier above the city streets. This diagram illustrates New York City zoning laws from the era. To prevent massive towers from blocking natural sunlight to the streets below, city planners established a 25-degree sloped line, drawn upward from the center of the road. New construction was legally barred from crossing this angle. Developers naturally reacted by building right up to the boundary, designing bulky, pyramid-shaped structures that aggressively packed in as much total square footage as legally allowed. But that shape contained a massive financial flaw. It generated huge, noisy lower floors that commanded very low rent, while severely restricting the highly desirable, quiet upper levels where executives paid a premium. Furthermore, a thick base requires dozens of elevator shafts to move all those ground floor workers around. As those shafts travel up to the thinly populated peak, they eat into the remaining floor space, making those upper levels nearly impossible to rent. Blindly chasing total square footage created an inefficient asset. A truly profitable skyscraper needed to maintain wide, straight floors from the bottom all the way up to the top. Looking at a top-down representation of the zoning code reveals a crucial exception. If a building's footprint shrank to exactly 25% of the total plot area, the sloped line rule no longer applied. That column could rise indefinitely. The architects exploited this loophole by stepping the Empire State Building back much earlier than the law required. At the 5th, 20th, and 30th floors, they carved inward until they hit that specific 25% threshold. From there, the building shot straight up for over 40 floors, cleanly piercing the city's sloped restriction. This sheer, straight column cleanly solved the elevator problem. With a uniform shape, they could consolidate the lift shafts into a highly efficient central core, leaving a continuous 28-foot ring of office space running perfectly along the perimeter. Every desk in that outer ring was positioned close to a window, flooded with sunlight and fully insulated from the noise of the street. Because of this layout, the upper floors commanded $3 per square foot in rent, roughly triple the rate of the sprawling, darker lower levels. By intentionally abandoning thousands of square feet of cheap space near the ground, they engineered a vertical structure loaded entirely with high-yield, premium real estate. Right as the doors opened for business, the American economy collapsed. The Great Depression wiped out millions of jobs, nationwide wages fell by nearly half, and the demand for corporate office space essentially vanished. With companies unable to sign leases, the building's primary business model failed. Barely a quarter of the vast office spaces were occupied, earning the tower the nickname the Empty State Building and pushing the developers toward bankruptcy. Survival required an immediate pivot. At the absolute top of the tower, on the 86th and 102nd floors, the owners began monetizing the sheer physical hype of the building by opening public observatories. At $1 a ticket, tourists flocked to the platforms. The observatories drew over 1 million visitors in their first year alone, generating enough cash flow to keep the massive structure afloat while the commercial market slowly recovered. The tower's immense scale became a standalone product, drawing paying tourists when the commercial office market could no longer sustain the building. Above those observatories sat a giant spire. It was originally built to serve as an ambitious docking station for passenger airships, an idea that quickly proved entirely impractical and was abandoned. But that empty mast soon found an incredibly lucrative second life. In the early days of television, NBC leased out the 85th floor, installed an enormous transmitter, and turned the highest point in the city into a broadcasting hub. Thanks to its unmatched elevation, the high-powered signal easily cleared the skyline, broadcasting cleanly across 4 different states. Today, that geographical advantage generates tens of millions of dollars in modern revenue. This breakdown reveals the tower's diversified modern yield. Out of its $500 million annual intake, roughly $350 million comes from premium office rentals. Another $130 million flows from the viewing platforms, and $30 million is generated by media antennas. The Empire State Building's longevity stems from a design that looked far beyond simple office space. By exploiting zoning laws and adapting the geometry for multiple industries, its creators engineered a resilient, diversified business portfolio directly into the skyline.